Stood in the cafeteria, holding a rotten apple, while my best friend smiled and watched me humiliate myself. My name is Sophia. Mia and I didn't just meet. We became a part of each other. It was kindergarten, and I was the shy new kid hiding by the cubbies. She marched over, a tiny force of nature with mismatched socks, and shoved a fistful of broken crayons at me. "Here," she'd said, "you can use my colors." From that moment, we were a package deal. Our friendship was built in the fortresses of blanket forts and whispered secrets after lights out. I was the quiet planner, she was the bold adventurer. Her house was my second home. It was always a little chaotic, a little loud, a little less than mine, but it was filled with a warmth I craved. Her mom worked 2 jobs and money was always tight. I remember once her favorite jeans ripped at the knee and she was genuinely upset because she knew it would be months before she could get another pair. I didn't understand that kind of worry then. My dad's construction business was doing well. If I ripped my jeans, we'd just go to the mall. I see now how those differences, so invisible to me, were taking root in her. I'd offer to share my clothes, my things, thinking I was being a good friend. I didn't realize that for her, it was a constant, quiet reminder of what she didn't have. When our acceptance letters to the University of Illinois came on the same day, we screamed and cried in my driveway. It felt like destiny. We found a small, slightly shabby apartment off campus, and for the first month, it was perfect. It was our childhood dream, just grown up. We'd stay up too late, eating cheap pizza and mapping out our futures. I was going to major in business. She was undeclared, but she talked about going into social work, of all things. She wanted to help kids who felt as unseen as she sometimes had. Then she met Jason at a Sigma chai party. He was everything we rolled our eyes at in high school. The entitled fraternity prince with a perfectly messy haircut and a smile that felt more like a challenge. He came from a different world, one of trust funds and summer homes. And he zeroed in on Mia with an intensity that was flattering and frankly a little frightening. The change wasn't immediate. It was a slow, chilling shift. First, it was the clothes. Suddenly, her thrift store finds were replaced with brand name tags I knew she couldn't afford on her part-time job salary. Then it was the comments, always delivered with a light, almost teasing laugh that made it hard to call her out. "God, Saf, are you still wearing that sweater?" she'd ask, fingering the sleeve of my perfectly comfortable cashmere blend. "It's so high school." I'd laugh it off, a knot forming in my stomach. "Yeah, well, it's warm. My dad's company is doing just fine, thanks." But the real gut punch came a few weeks later. We were in the student union, and I was telling a story about a funny customer from my old high school job at a smoothie place. Jason cut me off, his voice loud and dripping with a mock sympathetic drawl. "Aw, look at you, having a real job," he said, slinging an arm around Mia. "It's cute when daddy's girls try to play at being relatable." The air left my lungs. My face burned. My eyes instantly flicked to Mia. This was the moment. This was where she'd elbow him and say, "Shut up, Jason. Her dad worked his ass off." This was the Mia I knew would defend me. Instead, she let out a tinkling laugh and leaned into him. "Oh, don't mind her, Jay. She's always been a little sensitive." It felt like the floor had vanished. I was falling. The person sitting next to him wasn't my best friend. She was a stranger wearing Mia's face, and the look she gave me over his shoulder wasn't an apology, it was a warning. She had chosen her side, and I was now on the outside, completely alone. The silence in our apartment became a third roommate. Mia was never home, and when she was, she moved through the rooms like a ghost, her phone permanently glued to her hand, texting him. If I tried to talk to her, to ask about her classes, about her mom, I was met with one-word answers or a wall of cold indifference. The vibrant, laughing girl I'd moved in with had been replaced by a hollowed-out replica obsessed with her own reflection in Jason's eyes. The cruelty, once passive, became her new language, and she spoke it fluently whenever he was around. It was a performance, a sickening audition for the role of Jason's girl. We were at a crowded, off-campus house party, crammed into a sticky kitchen. Someone bumped into me, and I spilled a little of my drink. Mia saw it. "Ugh, Sophia, always so clumsy," she announced, her voice cutting through the music. She turned to Jason and his friends, a conspiratorial smirk on her lips. "She's always been like this. Her dad bought her a brand new Jetta for her Sweet 16, and she cried because it was the wrong shade of blue. Can you believe it?" A few people chuckled nervously. quietly. Jason looked at me like I was a bug under a microscope. Some people just don't know how good they have it, he mused. The truth was, I had cried, but it was because my dad had surprised me by driving it home the night before my first final, and I was so stressed and sleep-deprived that I burst into tears of overwhelmed gratitude. Mia had been there. She'd hugged me and laughed about it. Now she was twisting that memory into a weapon to make me look spoiled and ungrateful. I felt so profoundly alone. I couldn't call my parents. My dad, a man who'd built his company with his own hands, would have been on the first flight to Chicago. He'd march into the dean's office, his voice booming, making a scene that would only cement my status as the daddy's girl they all accused me of being. The humiliation would be absolute. So I did the only thing I could. I made myself small. I became a ghost on campus, drifting from class to my dorm room, my head permanently down. But they wouldn't let me disappear. They enjoyed the hunt too much. I'd find my assigned library study carrel accidentally occupied by one of Jason's friends, my notes misplaced. They'd make loud comments about me as I walked across the quad. There goes the heiress, slumming it with us, common folk. Their laughter following me like a swarm of wasps. My world, which had felt so expansive and full of promise, shrank to the four walls of my bedroom and the constant gnawing dread of what they would do next. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake listening for her key in the lock, my stomach in knots. The worst part was the grief. I was mourning my best friend, and she was still alive, living 10 feet away from me, actively enjoying my pain. The isolation was a cage, and I was just waiting for them to decide it was time for the public spectacle. The university cafeteria was my own personal hell, a vast echoing chamber of noise and 1,000 judging eyes. I'd developed a routine. Get in, find an empty cable in the most remote corner, keep my head down, and get out. That day, I was pushing a limp salad around my plate, trying to ignore the roaring in my ears that was my own anxiety, when I felt the atmosphere shift. The noise around me dimmed. I looked up. Mia and Jason were swaggering towards me, flanked by their usual sycophants. They moved with a lazy, predatory confidence, and in Mia's hand, held delicately between her thumb and forefinger, was a brown, shriveled, visibly rotting apple. She must have fished it out of the compost bin near the dining hall exit. My blood ran cold. This was it. The trap was springing. "Hey, Sophia," Mia cooed, her voice a grotesque parody of sweetness. She placed the apple on my tray with a soft, final thud. The putrid, sweet smell hit my nostrils. I was always going on about sustainability and not being wasteful, right? "I found this. Thought you'd appreciate it." A few people at nearby tables had stopped eating, their forks hovering midair. I felt every single pair of eyes lock onto me. My face was on fire, a burning mask of shame. "That's disgusting, Mia," I whispered, my voice trembling. Just leave me alone." Jason took a step forward, his presence physically imposing. He crossed his arms, his smirk a blade. "She went out of her way for you, princess. The least you can do is be grateful." He leaned in slightly. "Go on, eat it." My heart was a frantic, trapped bird, beating against my ribs. I looked past him, directly at Mia. "Please," I begged her with my eyes. "Remember me. Remember us. Remember the treehouse. Remember promising we'd be old ladies together. Please, Mia. Stop this." But her eyes were empty. There was no recognition, no remorse. There was only a cold, glittering triumph. She was savoring this. My humiliation was her victory. "Eat it," she repeated, her voice dropping all pretense of sweetness, becoming hard and flat. "Or I promise you, your life here will become a living hell you can't even imagine." A hot tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek. The entire section of the cavernous room was silent now, a collective, breathless audience to my execution. The world narrowed to that rotting piece of fruit and the expectant, cruel faces of my tormentors. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I thought I'd vomit right there. With a hand that shook so badly I could barely control it, I reached out and picked up the apple. The skin was soft and slimy, giving way under my fingers. The smell was overpowering. A part of me, the proud part my father had raised, was screaming in protest, but the larger, broken part of me was just so tired. I brought it to my lips, I closed my eyes, and I took a small biting into the mushy, fermented flesh. The taste was unspeakable. A wave of gasps, followed by a burst of nervous, cruel laughter, rippled through the crowd. In that moment, I wasn't Sophia anymore. I was just a thing they had broken. And then, through the roaring in my ears and the sound of my own shattering heart, a voice, calm and steady, cut through the noise like a knife. "I think that's enough." The silence that followed was more profound than any that had come before. Every single head in the cafeteria swiveled in unison, a grotesque choreography toward the source of the voice. It came from a table a few yards away. A guy was sitting alone, a massive engineering textbook open in front of him. I'd seen him around campus. Daniel. He was a transfer student who kept to himself. He was always in the library, always wore glasses, and always dressed in loose, faded hoodies that swallowed his frame. To everyone, he was just background noise. The quiet nerd, a non-entity. Jason recovered first, his ego bruised by the interruption. He let out a loud, derisive laugh that echoed in the quiet hall. Well, what's this? The library mascot wants to play hero? He sneered, puffing out his chest. Mind your own business, Four Eyes. Daniel didn't flinch. He closed his textbook with a deliberate, resonant thump. Then he stood up, and for the first time, I realized he was tall. Really tall. He didn't look angry or aggressive. He looked resolved, completely and utterly sure of himself. "You're the one making a scene," Daniel said, his voice low but carrying, every syllable crisp and clear. "You're harassing someone who just wants to eat her lunch in peace. So yeah, it became my business." "Or what?" Jason took a threatening step forward, his fists clenching. The air crackled with tension. "You gonna read me to death? Give me a paper cut with your textbook?" It happened faster than anyone could process. As Jason lunged to shove him, Daniel didn't meet him head-on. He moved with an almost lazy grace, sidestepping the charge. In one fluid motion, he caught Jason's outstretched arm, twisted it just enough to make Jason cry out in surprise and pain, and used the bigger guy's own momentum to slam him hard, back first, into a nearby empty table. The crash was deafening. The table screeched across the linoleum, plastic trays and utensils clattering to the floor. Jason lay there, sprawled and winded, more stunned than injured, his pride shattered into a million pieces. In the movement, Daniel's baggy hoodie had ridden up, revealing a glimpse of a powerfully built, corded forearm and a shoulder that was pure, defined muscle. The dichotomy was staggering. The brainy, unassuming transfer student was built like a lightweight boxier. A dead, awed silence fell over the entire cafeteria. The legend of Daniel was born in that instant. Daniel calmly adjusted his glasses, which had somehow stayed perfectly perched on his nose. He looked first at Mia, who was staring, open-mouthed and pale, at her fallen king. Then his gaze shifted to me. His eyes, behind those lenses, were the kindest I'd ever seen. They weren't full of pity. They were full of understanding. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft now, meant only for me. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, the vile taste of the rotten apple still coating my tongue. But for the first time in months, the crushing weight of my isolation lifted just a fraction. I wasn't alone anymore. The campus gossip machine went into overdrive, but the narrative had irrevocably shifted. Overnight, I went from being that spoiled girl Mia and Jason mess with to the girl Daniel stood up for. The whispers that trailed me in the hallways were no longer mocking. They were curious, almost respectful. Jason and Mia, their social currency devalued by a single humiliating takedown, seemed to shrink. They actively avoided us, slinking away when we entered a room, their power broken. But Daniel, however, became a folk hero, the scholar who could scrap. But the person I got to know was far more interesting than the legend. He found me the next day, tucked away in my usual hiding spot in the musty, silent depths of the university library. I was trying to read, but the words were just blurry shapes on the page. "Hey," his voice was a soft rumble, careful not to startle me. He slid into the chair opposite mine. I just wanted to check on you, make sure you were really okay." That simple act of kindness, of seeing me as a person who needed checking on, nearly undone me. The dam I'd built to hold back my tears finally broke. I cried, messy, quiet sobs right there at the library table, and he didn't try to shush me or tell me it was okay. He just waited, a solid, patient presence until the storm passed. That was the start of us. We began studying together. I learned he was on a full-ride academic scholarship for mechanical engineering. The muscles weren't for show. They were a relic of a childhood spent baling hay and fixing machinery on his family's struggling farm in rural Indiana. Mia. A bad disc injury in his senior year of high school had ended that future, forcing him to rely on his brilliant mind instead of his strong back. He was the smartest, most grounded person I had ever met. We fell into an easy rhythm. We'd camp out in the library for hours, fueled by terrible library coffee. He'd explain complex physics concepts with a patience I'd never known, and I'd help him navigate the baffling social politics of a big university. He never pushed me to talk about Mia or Jason, but he created a space where I felt safe enough to do so. I told him about the crayons, the treehouse, the promise to be old ladies together. I showed him the scars. As the weeks turned into months, the constant, gnawing knot of anxiety in my chest began to loosen. I started laughing again. Real laughs that didn't feel forced. I started remembering who Sophia was before the fear. I began to feel whole. And then, slowly, insidiously, something else began to grow. A warm, terrifying, wonderful feeling that spread through me every time he smiled his quiet, lopsided smile or finished one of my sentences. My heart would do a silly little flip when I saw him waiting for me by the library steps. But the old insecurities, forged in the fire of Mia's betrayal, crept back in. Why would he want you? The voice in my head whispered, "You're damaged goods. You're the girl who needed saving. He's brilliant and kind and a secret hero. You're just you." I convinced myself that confessing my feelings would ruin the one pure good thing that had come out of the wreckage of my life. So I locked my heart away, determined to be happy with just his friendship. I was a coward, protecting my fragile heart, but he was braver than I could ever be. It was a Thursday, and a cold, persistent rain was drumming against the tall library windows, casting the silent study room in a gray, intimate light. We'd been working on a brutal calculus problem set for 2 hours. Daniel suddenly closed his textbook with a definitive snap. The sound made me jump. "Sophia," he said, his voice unusually grave. He took off his glasses and began cleaning them meticulously on the edge of his hoodie, a nervous tic I'd come to recognize. My heart immediately launched into a frantic, panicked rhythm. This was it. He was going to say this was getting too intense. He was transferring. He'd met someone else. "We need to talk about something that isn't calculus," he said, his gaze fixed on me. Steady and sincere. "Okay," I managed, my voice a tight whisper. I braced for impact. "I know this might complicate things," he began, choosing his words with the same precision he used to solve equations. "And I value our friendship more than anything. So if you just want to stay friends, I will completely understand, and nothing will change, I promise." He took a deep breath. "But I can't keep pretending. I have feelings for you, Sophia, more than just friendship." The world didn't just stop, it melted away. The hum of the ventilation system, the patter of the rain, the distant sound of a page turning, it all faded into a distant, meaningless buzz. All that existed was the earnest intensity in his eyes, completely devoid of the mockery, malice, or pity I had grown so accustomed to. This was real. This was vulnerable. This was him. "Every time I saw them hurt you, it felt like a physical pain right here." He tapped his chest. "I couldn't stand it. I wanted to protect you, not because I thought you were weak, but because I saw how incredibly strong you were for enduring it all alone. You were the strongest person I'd ever seen, and the more I got to know you, your resilience, your quiet kindness, the way your nose scrunches when you're thinking hard, I just fell for you, completely." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or shame. They were tears of pure, unadulterated relief and a joy so profound, it was almost painful. The fortress I'd built around my heart crumbled to dust in an instant. "Daniel," I whispered, a watery, joyful smile breaking through my tears. "I've been feeling the exact same way for months. I was too scared to ruin what we had." The smile that spread across his face was brighter than the sun after a storm. It reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His grip was strong, warm, and sure. It felt like coming home after a long, cold journey in the dark. It felt like the first day of the rest of my life. As for Mia, her downfall wasn't a dramatic explosion, but a slow, quiet implosion. Her obsession with a toxic boy and her campaign to destroy me had cost her everything she supposedly wanted. She failed 3 of her core classes that semester. We heard through the grapevine, a hushed conversation in the registrar's line, that she'd been placed on academic probation. Then at the end of the spring semester, she was quietly, unceremoniously dismissed from the university for repeated academic failure. The news didn't bring me the triumphant satisfaction I might have once imagined. It just felt sad, a tragic, wasteful end to a story that had once been so beautiful. The Mia I loved had been gone a long time. This was just the final official footnote. My story, the one that truly mattered, the one built on respect and quiet strength and library conversations in the rain, was just beginning, and this time I wasn't just a character in someone else's narrative. I was the co-author.